Okay, I'm gonna hold my hands up. I used to be a reading addict. I thought the more books I consumed, the smarter and more successful I'd become. But of course, I was wrong. I wasn't building wisdom, I was just collecting books without any real results. Yes, I could drop a quick note or a couple of useless facts or two to impress someone, but nothing in my life actually changed. And the worst part is, it wasn't because I wasn't trying hard enough. It was because of a handful of bad reading habits I didn't even know I had. So if you're reading book after book and nothing's sticking, then you might be making the same mistakes I did. So today I'm going to be sharing 3 hidden habits that secretly made me forget everything I learned, so you can avoid the mistakes that held me back for years. And by the end of the video, you won't just spot these habits, you'll know exactly how to fix them. So every book you read, the information actually sticks and it starts to change your life. Let's dive in. So I started my reading habit when I was just around 17. The only reason why I bought a specific book or my first book was because I was moving to a 6th form and I didn't know anyone there. I was absolutely shitting myself. So the book I picked up was naturally How to Win Friends and Influence People. So for me, this book naturally opened up the floodgates to self-improvement. I brought every single self-help and productivity book I could get my hands on. I'd absolutely plow through every single book. You know, I'd stack them like trophies, and I convinced myself that I was growing quick. But obviously months after, I actually started to catch on that I couldn't remember the previous books that I've just read. I used to try and challenge myself and try and retain, key pieces of information in the books, like Influence by Robert Cialdini, but I just simply couldn't. Everything was so vague. I picked up bits and pieces, but I had no ability to flawlessly articulate myself. And that's when I realized something crucial. Finishing a book isn't the same as learning from it. So speed reading can be productive, but it can also feel productive as well. And there's a fine line where you need to be careful of. Because when you rush, you don't give your brain enough time to actually process and connect the dots. You don't allow yourself to reflect or pause. Your brain needs to be able to ponder on ideas and kind of marinate the information and allow the neurons to connect the dots. So how do you fix this? Slow the fuck down. So what I've learned is we all need to read with intention as opposed to urgency, and ask yourself questions as you go on. Pause to reflect, ponder to fully understand what you've just learned. Remember, it's not a race, it's about integration and not accumulation. So I used to try and memorize everything, the best quotes, the most powerful stats, even the framework. So I used to have flashcards, Anki decks, Quizlet subscriptions, highlight pages, you name it, I had it. All because I wanted to sound smart, I wanted to be the person who always has the perfect thing to say at the perfect time and do it with perfection. And for a while at the start, it actually did work, but eventually, the more books I read, the harder it came to memorize everything. So inevitably, my system collapsed and I felt like a fucking idiot. I put so much effort into studying the books, but I could barely, retain any of this information. Because I needed some guidance, I turned to the GOAT of reading. So I watched Naval Ravikant and the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said something that completely flipped it all for me. He said, if you're trying to memorize information, you don't really understand it. And I think that hit me really hard because, real understanding doesn't require flashcards. It just sticks because it makes sense. Memorization is very, very surface level, and it does have its use for like studying for tests and stuff. But if we want to have real knowledge, we want to be able to understand things on a deeper and more meaningful level. So here's 2 ways to fix it. So the first one is you need to understand how to understand. So I'd suggest studying different ways on how to understand, because there's different levels, different systems on how to do it. Or you could just watch this video here and I explain everything. So the second way is to use my GPT called Simply Understand. So basically you put a topic or an idea of what you want to understand. It will ask you questions and help you go through different levels of understanding. So the goal is to be able to articulate and explain yourself very clearly, so a 10-year-old will be able to understand. So in this way, we're using the Feynman technique. So if you can teach it in your words, perfect. If not, spend a little bit of time wrestling with the idea until it clicks, because when you get it and you really get it, memorization is kind of the default and, becomes effortless. You don't have to, you can't understand something, if that makes sense. The retention of information just becomes natural. Okay, so we all get this dopamine hit when we finish a book. You feel smarter, you feel like your intelligence bar has increased by 1 point. So a couple of days later, you allow your ideas to marinate in your brain. And a couple of weeks go by and you completely forget the most important stage of finishing the book. You've disregarded the implementation stage. So there's no revisits, no changes, no action. After a while, you miss that dopamine hit of receiving new information. So, you start to read something completely new, which is what I call the success zombie trap. So I know it because I used to be one. I used to read, listen, watch, consume, and do nothing about it after. I kind of tricked myself that I was making progress, which is what I was speaking about a little bit earlier. So because the fact that I was constantly forgetting what I was reading was doing my head in, I binge watched a lot of YouTubers reading systems. I watched Ali Abdaal's, Tia Forte's, Thomas Frank, Alex read books, and I eventually built my own from, you know, taking inspiration from other people. So I'll definitely 100% make a video about my reading system, but essentially, you know, what I started doing after every chapter was asking myself 2 questions. What is one small action I can take based on this? Or what's one idea I can start to write about to fully understand to help me improve my life? You know, I don't want to give you this massive system to create and overwhelm you, you know. I want you to just implement this one tiny step to improve your reading experience, because reading without action is just purely just information. So the next time you finish a chapter, don't close it off and move on. Ask yourself these questions, reflect, and then act. So these 3 habits were quietly sabotaging how I read, and once I fixed them, my whole reading experience just became so much more enjoyable. You know, books started sticking, my memory actually improved. Finally felt like I was learning for real. So if you want to double down on this, I made a video showing 6 tools that made reading easier, smoother, and way more fun to do. Check that video here. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.